Hey, for those who are absent today, I forgot to record during class. So I'm gonna have to record it all over again and say it all over again. So this is what we did today in class. We took notes on a PowerPoint. So we were, it depends on what class you were. Some classes you guys started this the day before or the week before. And some of you guys, you didn't start it until today. So I'm gonna start over. So if you already saw the first little bit, then kind of fast forward a little bit until you reach the point where we ended class when you were in. So you're going to take notes on anything that is underlined. So make sure that you pay attention to what is underlined. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the Roaring Twenties, that's what you're going to call your notes. One thing that I mentioned at the beginning of the 20s was the connection between the Industrial Revolution and World War I and Roaring Twenties is that in the Industrial Revolution, we started building factories and mass producing. During World War I, one of the causes of World War I was that the European powers were starting to participate in what we call militarism, or basically beefing up your military. So we start selling our products that we make from our factories to European powers in World War I. Then we use those same factories to make our own products in World War I. Once World War I is over, those factories that were making war products and weapons and equipment, some of those are turned into factories for other purposes, for making common everyday goods like radios, cars, and just belting it out. Because they're able to make so much with all these factories, the price is going way down and a lot of people can buy it because the price isn't so high. So the connection to the 20s is we're buying all that stuff and producing all that stuff. And it's just a boom, really, during the 20s. We're just making a lot and buying a lot and partying a lot. And so that's why it's called the Roaring 20s. So I'm going to do the fast version of this. The only point of me showing this one is after the war, and you're going to write this first part down. After the war, we have this saying that happens. Our president says, like, let's return to normal. Let's get a return to normalcy after the war and back to normal. Now the war is over. And I asked everybody in class, so have you heard that before? Have you heard somebody say, let's get back to normal, or when we get back to normal, or this is the new normal? You guys have probably heard that with COVID, right? Remember, at the tail end of World War I, the tail end of World War I was the Spanish flu. And we learned about this already. We had to do a lot of the same safety protocols that we do today during the coronavirus. So, once World War I and the Spanish flu are over, okay, let's return to normal. And that's what's going on right now, right? We're going through the COVID. And then after, we're going to say, okay, let's return to normal. All right, the American Consumer Society. This is a huge important slide because consumer means buying something, right? You buy something. If you consume something, you're buying it, and you're taking it in. So the 20s is all about consuming and buying, like literally buy. We just buy up a ton of stuff. So you can take a picture of the assembly lines and one of the factories. That's the reason why we can buy so much. So welfare capitalism is where there is a high amount of people, like where if you do a lot, then you make a lot. But you also have welfare programs in there to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. And because of welfare, income is increasing. They raise the minimum wage. So people are making more money. Woohoo! And when you make more money, you spend more money. Yay! When we talked about the progressive era, we talked about they made things better than before. They were reforming things to have child labor laws, so you don't have to work when you're a child, have a minimum or maximum 8-hour workday, be able to get paid if you get hurt when you're at a job. So they changed all these things in the workplace to make jobs better. And now they're raising your income. So the use of unions and the influence of unions starts to decrease because they're not as important anymore, because people are doing pretty good. Their jobs are better. Safety is better. They're getting paid better. What's to complain about really anymore? So in these factories, we have, again, a huge mass production. Just start belting all of these products out in these factories. So we have a huge wide variety and availability of consumer products at, of course, affordable, cheaper prices. And this is the main thing that I really don't like, and my classes heard it. Installment plans. What that basically means is you will buy something, and then every month you'll put a payment or an installment till eventually you pay it off. And now this wasn't really new. It just became popular at the time. This is where this in the 20s is where buying something on credit, where you kind of say, I'm paying you back later, or I'm buying this and I'll pay the bank back later through my credit card. I'll pay them back later. This whole thing starts then. And this is why I hate this part of the 20s, is because one of the biggest problems that we have for our finances today, especially in America, but other countries as well, we're just probably the worst at it, is going into debt, because you buy, and you don't have to pay it back soon. And you just keep increasing, you just keep having to raise your, interest fees, and it keeps accumulating. And then you just get yourself in so much debt because you're buying things that you don't have the money for. You're just buying it with your credit card, and you're saying, I'll pay the bank back later. And that's a huge problem. I think that's a huge problem. So this is where that all started. Okay, just kind of browsing through. There was this increasing feeling that a lot of whites had, that they were feeling resentful towards blacks for them trying to increase their status. It's like some of the whites who are still racist, they're like, I want you to stay down. They're still not over slaves getting their freedom. This is 60 years after, so it's like the next generation down, or 2 generations down. They're still pretty a lot of people are still pretty racist and hateful. So there's a huge surgence of people who are just hating how much blacks are starting to raise their status. And that's what the white resentment is about. So lynchings, or basically executions, usually by hanging, start to increase. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. With immigrants, after World War I, World War I was in Europe, right? So we're nervous about people in Europe because you just had a war. We don't really want people over here who started a war. Also, one reason why Russia left the war is because they had a revolution in their country, and they turned communist. And we here in America really don't like communism. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about the Cold War and why that is. But we really don't like communism. And we have this fear that they're going to come into our country and turn us communist. That's what this first Red Scare is all about. So we put in these quota laws to basically say, all the Europeans, we're only going to allow 3% of them to come into the country. With women, we have the 19th Amendment that gave us the right to vote. They institute all these programs to help women now that they have the right to vote. And we have the influence of the flapper girl, this rebellious, I don't want to dress like my mother kind of phase that they go in. They cut their hair short. Some of them wear boyish clothes. And, this lady, she's got really short hemlines and doing all this rebellious stuff that their mothers would never do. Then we have Prohibition, where they make alcohol legal, which is the 18th Amendment. Bootleggers are the names of the people who are smuggling alcohol into places like speakeasies, which are secret parts of buildings, the secret areas of buildings. They're called basically underground saloons, where it's basically like a bar or like a dance club that they'll have in a secret back location of a store or something, and they'll serve alcohol there, and those are speakeasies. Part of the white resentment that had occurred was the emergence of the Ku Klux Klan. This is where the highest numbers of enrollment have ever happened, was during the 20s. Enrollment just shot up because they're just like, they were basically angry that blacks were raising their status. And this was like the political police state of the Democrat Party at the time, showing what their response is. We're going to skip those parts because we're running out of time. The jazz age, 20s was all about jazz music, jazz dancing. Movies, so much about jazz. So it was like this rebellious youth, like I talked about earlier. They're rebellious. They don't want to do things their parents did. So when jazz comes in, they just love it. They're listening to it on the radio. They're going to talkies or cinema movies, you know. They have, yeah, jazz is just super, super important. It's the jazz age because 20s is all about jazz, listening to jazz music. Everybody's listening to it. This right here is an example of blackface. Whites, again, because of white resentment, still were not comfortable with blacks being stars in shows. So whenever they needed a black character, they just took a white person, put them in blackface, and they would be the black character. So this was pretty popular, pretty normal for them at the time to see blackface, which we know today is highly offensive and wrong. If you want to portray a black person, have a black person. Don't try to have a white person replace the black person. That's not right. The Harlem Renaissance Harlem is this city where after everybody starts moving in this great migration from the south to the north, and Harlem is one of the main cities that a lot of black people move to, and they just are this whole focus on challenging the racist stereotypes that have been going on for decades, saying black is beautiful, showing the pride that they want to have in themselves and their culture. And this is where a lot of awesome artists come in and say, look, it shouldn't just be the white standard of art. Look, blacks can have have a great standard as well. It's not just, shouldn't compare us to whites all the time. It's just art. We can do it too, kind of thing. So Harlem Renaissance was really a big way to help step up the black status in society, which is again why resentment was happening, because it was going like this. Blacks were trying to move up and whites were trying to push them down. So it was kind of like that. So that's it. If you need to pause at any time, go back and get all those notes down. We're going to have an activity tomorrow. We're going to kind of delve more specifically into some of these things in more detail. So that's it for class today. Make sure you get all those notes down, and send me a picture, just an email me a picture of your notes, or just bring it in to show it to me, because I have an assignment on Canvas that will give you some points for doing your notes. So make sure you show it to me, or I can't give you the credit for that. Okay, hopefully you see you guys the next day.